Ajá. ¿Empiezo?
Entonces, ¿vamos a hablar del tema o no?
Yeah, in the past 10 years, I think our understanding of gender, especially in the States, has expanded tremendously. And I didn't collect any stories that represented a spectrum of genders. I really collected stories. I only heard stories from people who identified as women. And since the book has come out, many people have found me and told me that their stories as trans women or trans men are really important and should be included as part of the conversation. So what happens when you get a period and you're 12 years old and you have, let's say you identify as a boy actually, and so there's an added level of confusion and shame, and I think that experience can be especially isolating when you have never heard anyone else talk about it. And so I think that's a particular perspective that culturally we've moved to being much more open to talking about gender as a spectrum, and I think is really important to share and is absent from the book as it exists. Yeah, so more stories from people of all genders.
Thank you. It's amazing.
I mean, that's part of why this feels so surreal, is that the book and the experience of sharing these stories out loud is what got me interested in theater. We would do readings, and there was something very alive in the room that felt so different from the experience of just reading something on the page. And I was like, what is this? What is this powerful thing? Oh, this is theater. Oh, I think this is what I want to spend my life figuring out, getting to that feeling. So to see it come full circle is personally very moving. But I also think 10 years ago, this play wouldn't really have been possible in the way that it is now. This was so amazing because the audience was so diverse in terms of age, in terms of genders, parents bringing their children, teenagers coming together as friends. And I think 10 years later, this could be a play that could be enjoyed by a public and could be enjoyed by not just radical feminists. It doesn't have to be an underground project. It can be something that is that anyone can feel welcome at, and that feels so exciting. And it also feels like books move at a really slow pace. It's one person at a time, but tonight, seeing this as a show, I really feel like everyone will go home and start having this conversation. So to me, it feels like such an effective political form and a really energizing, motivating one. Yeah, there's a spirit in the room that only happens in theater where you feel like you have ammunition from everyone around you to be braver than you might be on your own. Yeah. I love that aspect of this production. I think it's so conceptually brilliant because I always think about, why does something have to be a play? Why couldn't it be a show or a movie? And I think that what's unique to theater is the reality, and what this show embraces is like you're watching these women transform into different characters, but you never forget that they're a real family and just how amazing that is, and the conversations that they must have had during rehearsal or around the show, the experience of putting this on, how much they must have spoken about this subject. And so this show invites us, I think, to think about our real families, and it's inspiring to just know that there's a real family that is talking in this way, that it's not fiction, so that's operating on one plane, and then the fiction or the history is operating on another, and you have both. You have both in this show. So I think there's something. It just amplifies the power of sharing challenging stories. Yeah. This is why I collected stories for a really long time. And I think for a while I thought it was about information. Like, if people have information, the taboo will go away. But after hearing so many stories, especially people my generation and younger who have the internet, who have all the information they need, it's clearly not enough. So I'm pretty convinced that the problem is cultural and societal. It's not about access just to information, though that's important. And so what's interesting and inspiring for me, and hopefully any of you, is that it's a cultural problem, so the solution can also be cultural. So how can we all work together to change the culture? Does that mean, it can mean going home and asking your mother for her story. It can mean whatever gender you are. It can mean asking, talking about it with your daughter. It can mean putting on this show. I imagine and hope that there's someday soon a future where the mainstream culture reflects our reality, such that you would watch a show where a woman or anyone goes to get a tampon or address her period as frequently as you would see someone eating breakfast. Like, it's just common. It's not something, I've never really seen that on TV. But in order for the mainstream to change, I think it does have to start in a radical space or in an artistic space, or even just a moment of personal courage, where you break a rule. And I think that these small actions, these small cultural actions, eventually add up to influence the mainstream. And so it has to be a collective effort. So if you've made it this far in this interview, join me and all of us. Yeah. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.